So now we're going to start the recording, everyone. And I'm going to turn over control of the presentation right now to Greg Mortson from Environics Analytics, who will be discussing with you the actual market research reports that you are going to be receiving them and how you can apply them to your business and your community. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Ramona. I appreciate that. Just in terms of an introduction, I'm a account manager here at Environics Analytics, and I've been here for quite some times now, helping out municipalities, provincial government, federal government, just helping them make the best use of our data and our insights. So I've worked with some municipalities in the past in conjunction with the CUI, so I'm very excited to be here. In terms of a introduction to EA, one thing I'll mention is, I'll talk for probably about 30 minutes. I'll sort of explain how to interpret these results. I'll give you some ideas about how you can start using some of these insights, and then I'll turn it over to Ramona, and she's going to go a lot deeper into real tangible ways in which you can use the data. So, and then there'll be some time for some discussion and Q&As after. So if you want to ask questions, feel free to start putting them in the chat, and we can get to them as soon as we're through our initial spiels here. So in terms of what Environics Analytics does, we first and foremost have a lot of really, really good, reliable data, all estimated for the current year. So yes, we do take a lot of census data, but we estimate it for the current year and not just the census year. And then we also project that data out into the future. So you get a sense as to what's going to go on in 3, 5, and 10 years in terms of population growth and households and family size and family characteristics and all sorts of demographics we model forward. In addition to a whole bunch of other data that we represent at a postal code level. So some of that data I'm going to be exposing you to today, which is exciting. We also do a lot of analytics. So the results of these reports that I'm going to show are a lot of the type of analytical work we do. We also do a lot of modeling and a lot more complex things. And then finally, we have some software solutions as well that can help quickly arrive at these sorts of insights. So I've already explained what we're going to be doing today. I'll be helping you interpret the report, giving you some guidance on how to use it. And then Ramona's going to go a lot deeper. But this is very exciting for me, as I said. I mean, usually this type of data is reserved for often larger organizations. They spend a lot of money on this kind of thing to help them make good business decisions. And, I think in a lot of cases, you folks are going to know your areas best. So I think a lot of this is going to be what you see in the report might back up with data, things you may already know about your neighborhoods. But I'm hoping you'll find that there are some nuggets of information that you may not have known that you could help inform decisioning when it comes to attracting people to your business or people to your services. So today I'm going to talk about things like, of course, demographic data. That's sort of the foundational way in which we describe audiences and households across the country, but we'll also start getting into behavioral data. So how do they consume media? Where do they like to shop? Things like that. And then finally, we're going to get into some what we call psychographic data, which is what are those values that people in your neighborhoods hold dear, and how does that inform their decisions and behaviors? So that's a really cool data set we'll get to a little bit later to help you inform how you're going to connect with folks in your area. So the way these reports work is we've created what we call trade areas. So this is an area around your specific business that really is the primary households and population that your business serves. So normally we might say that 70, 80% of the visitors might come from within these boundaries. We do create these differently in some ways if we're doing some custom work. But in this case, what we've done is we've taken each one of your businesses, and to try to tailor these trade areas a little bit, we've created a boundary that for a rural business that is 15 minutes away. So any household within this boundary can get to your location within 15 minutes. And that's for any businesses that the CUI has categorized as rural. But we also know we have more urban businesses on the phone. So for those businesses, what we've done is we've created a 15-minute walk time. So any household or population within that boundary can get to your store by a 15-minute walk time. If it takes you 16 minutes to walk to the store, you're not included in this boundary, right? So what that does is those urban areas have a much smaller trade area to analyze, because we do know that because populations are more concentrated in those urban areas, that's where you're primarily going to get your consumers. But for those rural areas, we do know that you tend to draw on a much larger area, so that creates this bigger boundary. So all these insights that you're going to see here today are all really focused on those households and that population within those two boundaries. And here's an example of each. On the left-hand side here, you can see we've classified it as a rural business. And this is a 15-minute walk time boundary within for that rural business. On the right-hand side, you see what we've classified as right-hand side rural example, left-hand side urban. So the right-hand side is going to be a bit of a larger drive time, or a 15-minute drive time. And those are again, that's the households and the populations we're going to look at in these reports. So for demographics, that's the first section of the report I'm going to talk about. And again, this is all data that we've estimated for 2024. So it's up-to-date data. And it looks at things like population sizes, households, what type of housings are there, what are the income levels, what are the education and employment habits or tendencies for this area, as well as a lot of diversity indicators as well. So you get a ton of information just looking at this demographic data. And again, often it's things you may already anecdotally know, but hopefully there are some nuggets there that you're going to find interesting and that you can use to help inform decisioning. So the way you read just about all the information in the report is similar to this. So this is a very important concept when looking at this information. But what you see here is a number of demographic variables based on the population and households. So I'm going to talk just about the top right one here for a moment. And this looks at the predominant family status within your trade area. So what we can see here is that 18.8% of the households within this trade area classify themselves as total lone parent families. So, and right below that, you're going to see an index value. Whenever you see index, you can consider that a comparison indicator. So what we're doing here is we're comparing the value of the households within this trade area to the rest of the province. So for all these different variables, we're comparing your trade area to the rest of the province and the average for the rest of the province. So what that is doing is it's putting some of these numbers into context. It's helping you make sense of them within the broader context of the province. So when you see an index here of 112, the base level is 100. So that if that index was 100, it would also be 18.8% total lone parent families in the province, or it would have been equal to the province. Because it's 112, that means that this value is 12% higher than what it is for the rest of the province. So what you're seeing here is a comparison indicator to say that this type of family over-indexes or is more common within this trade area than the rest of the province. And that's all that's saying. Similarly, when we look at marital status, we can see that 52.5% of the households within this trade area consider themselves married or common law. Now that value, you can see the index beneath that is 93. So what that means is it's 7% less than the provincial average for the tendency for marital status to be married or common law. So again, and we've color-coded that as well. So higher indexes, you'll see colored in red, indicating that this is unique variable in terms of the broader context in that it over-indexes or is higher than the provincial average. If it's gray, it's about at par with the rest of the province. And if it's blue, and you'll see some of those later, that means it's quite a bit lower than the provincial average. So that concept, and I can go over it again if you need at the end, just let me know. But it's very important here because that's how we make sense out of a lot of these different variables. So ways in which demographic data can help, you can see things like, are there a lot of families in my trade areas? How old do the children tend to be in my trade area? You know, should I expand my toy section in response to this? Or are there decisions that depend on how many kids there are and if there's a lot of families? And I think that is probably the case for a lot of businesses here. Dominant marital status, does that, if you have a lot of singles, how do your services and retail offerings change as opposed to if there's a lot of married couples or families? Do they skew old or young? If there's more seniors, do I want to offer more discounts, perhaps for seniors to draw them out to your store? And then, of course, income levels. You also get average household income, and that can help you understand how much money there is in the market for you to maybe pursue some luxury items on offer. So these are some of the kind of decisionings you can start to make once you have a sense as to what the demographics of an area are. And there's a ton of good information there. The next section I'm going to touch on is where people tend to shop and eat. This is just one snippet from this section. You'll see a lot of different types of stores in the report, but this section just looks at pet stores, for example. So what you see on the left-hand side here is we've ranked it by volume, or ranked it by the people who shopped, the percentage of people who shopped at these different pet stores over the past year. And we've ranked it. So the top ranking pet supply store that people have shopped at in this trade area is Pet Values. So 29.6% of the people in this trade area have shopped at Pet Value in the last year. And you can see that index is 129. So people are 29% more likely than the rest of the province to go to Pet Value in this trade area. You also see that we've ranked it Pet Value, PetSmart, grocery stores. So you can start to get a sense as to where those places are that people tend to go, if available, within your trade area. We also rank it by index here. So this will rank it by ways in which your trade area differ from the rest of the province. So you can see an index here of 168. That's the highest index that we have here. And that's indicating that people are 68% higher than the rest of the province to shop for pet supplies at department store. But you can see it's only 9.7%. So it's really important often to look at these two values in concert, to look at, okay, yes, it's a high index. So people in this trade area definitely tend to shop at department stores, and that, different than the provincial average, but it's still only 9.7. Right? So it's always important to look at these two values together. So once you have a sense as to where people in your trade area tend to shop, you can start to understand what clothing stores do they go to. Maybe they go to Mark's Work Wearhouse a lot, so I might want to align some of my products to that type of consumer. Where do they go for toys and games again? Is that an audience that I want to start to capture? Maybe people tend to go to IKEA, so they're very design forward, people who like to get discount design forward type of products. So maybe you want to offer things that align to that type of thing. So these are all different ways in which you can use this information about where people in your trade area tend to shop if it's available. The next section here looks at the internet and more traditional media as well as social media habits. So we can start to get into things like television. We also have radio, newspapers, magazines. So this gives you an indication of how people in your trade area tend to consume these different types of media. So in this case, we're looking at television. So this is from a survey partner that we work with. We extrapolate this across the sampling across the country, and we're able to say that people within my trade area in this top example 19.72% of them consider themselves heavy television viewers, so almost 20%. If you look here at the base percentage, that's what's going on in the rest of the province. So in the rest of the province, people are 15.81% likely to say that they're a heavy television viewer. So really to get that index, you can see we're comparing those two percentages to say, well, people in this trade area are more likely to consider themselves heavy viewers. In fact, they're 25% more likely to say they're heavy viewers than the rest of the province. So again, the shading these indexes where they're different indicates, okay, how is my trade area unique from the rest of the province? So you're quickly able to see that television is pretty popular in this trade area on the whole. You can also, when looking just below this, start looking at what are they watching on the TV. Similarly, there's a section just like this for the internet. What do they do when they're browsing the internet? So you're able to see some of these different categories. So for example, curling is very popular within this trade area. You know, people are 45% more likely to watch curling in the typical week than the rest of the province. So all really good ways in which you know where people are already consuming media and information, and maybe it's a place that you want to connect with them where they already are. So for example, people might show that they like to listen to podcasts in your trade area. Maybe this is where you want to start advertising. People might like to watch cooking shows. Maybe I want to start expanding into some kitchen items. People look at online store reviews. That's a variable here. So maybe I should start paying more attention to this feedback on this forum. Maybe people look at the travel section in the newspaper. Is this something that, or a section that I want to start advertising maybe in my community newspaper? So these are all different ways in which you could start connecting better with the households and the populations in your trade area. The next section of media is always a popular one, obviously, is our social media section. So we start looking at the social media habits of people within your trade area, and again, how that compares to the rest of the province. So you can see here with Instagram, 47.2% of people within this trade area currently use Instagram. And we can see that index is higher than the provincial average by 12%. So very popular media channel, social media channel within this trade area. And below, we also point out those top activities. So what are people doing, excuse me, when they're on Instagram? So you can see, for example, 5% watch live videos. The dark bars are our trade area. And you can see that only 3.5% watch live videos for the rest of the province. That's our benchmark. So you can see that that tends to be a bit more popular in my trade area. Still only 5%, so that's something to consider. But obviously a very important channel for small businesses, and also pretty economical to start marketing through them. So we do have a lot of the top social media feeds. Somebody asked about, I think, Blue Sky the other day. We don't have that yet, but we do have things like Snapchat, Facebook. We have X, formerly Twitter. So you can start to see things like, you know, if it's a young population within my trade area, Snapchat is probably pretty popular. Maybe you should start advertising on that platform. You know, you hear a lot about Facebook viewership dwindling, but you'll see when looking at this data, it's still a very, very popular channel. You know, that maybe I want to use to connect with people in my trade area. And then you start combining some of these things. Let's say, you know, there's lots of families, you know, there's big families with young kids. How do I start changing the messaging on Facebook to use two pieces of insight or information in order to really start connecting with people in my trade area? We also have X, of course, and then finally we have things like, well, are people, you know, comfortable sharing their personal information on social media? So if they are, maybe I should start looking into requesting emails through these channels so that people can start joining my mailing list or my newsletter, things like that. Another interesting part of this report that you're going to be getting is how people within your trade area spend their money. So what we call this is our expenditure data. So you'll be able to see on average how much money do households within your trade area spend in a year versus what's their household income. So you can see here households spend, $72,032 a year on different categories that you'll see here. And their average household income is 97,758. Both of those values you can see just below there with indexes in the 70s. Both of those are below the provincial average. But then you can see how spending breaks down in these, I'm just showing three categories here. There's a lot of different categories that you'll have access to. In this example, I just picked on tobacco and alcohol. Sorry. Something just crashed. Apologize. Okay, sorry about that. So you can see, for example, average dollars per household per year is $2,991 on tobacco and alcohol. That index is 84, so you can see that's quite a bit below what the average dollar spent on this category is in the rest of the province. But you can see as a percentage of people's total expenditure in this trade area, it's 3.9, which is above the index. So they're, even though it's a lower dollar amount annually, they're actually spending a larger percentage on this category within the trade area than the rest of the province. Okay. And this is another section that's actually our food spend section. So this starts to get into food expenditures. So we can see that, I'm sorry, people bothering me, $11,769,000 a year they spend on food, which is 25% less than the provincial average. And then you can also see how much they spend on food from restaurants and or food from food stores as well. So that's per household annually. And you can also get into different types of food. So you can see here a bakery. They spend on average $525 a year at bakeries. Again, that's less than the provincial average, significantly less, about 30% less. But again, it over indexes when you look at the percentage of their total expenditures that happen at a bakery. So when you start looking at these categories as to how people are spending their actual dollars on, you're also able to say, maybe people are spending a lot of money on clothes comparatively. Is this a section of my store I want to expand? Things like gardening equipment is there, hardware store information is there. These are all different ways in which you can look at spending habits of people within your trade area to understand how you might want to change the mix of your product or services to really align to how they're already spending their money. The next section I'll talk about is our psychographic data. It's just a fancy way of saying the attitudes or values that people hold. So there's about 67 of these different values, I'll call them. And these are great to help you understand, what are the mindsets of people within your trade area. And it helps to maybe tweak your messaging if you're reaching out to them with some promotional materials. How do I modify the messaging slightly to align with some of these values that they hold dear? And you know that these values are going to drive different types of behavior. Also, imagery is a big one here. So if you advertise with some sort of stock photo or there's a picture you want to use, it's always good to see if you could align that photo with these values that people have in your trade area. So for example, in this trade area, the top social value is global consciousness. So this is in terms of that top value when compared to the rest of the province. So people in this trade area really feel like a citizen of the world primarily, and that sort of supersedes maybe feeling like a member of their community or any smaller level of geography. These are really globally conscious people who see themselves the whole world is their neighborhood. So how do you want to engage with these people knowing that? Maybe you want to take a more global view to how your products are positioned, or the value of some of your products or your services. So really important to look at these strong values, but also equally important to look at some of those weak values. So these are things that people don't tend to believe in your trade area. So interestingly enough, what pops up here is that people in this trade area don't feel as attracted to nature as the rest of the province. So this is a value that they align with. So maybe I want to just turn down the volume on any sort of promotional material that suggests my products being used in nature, or have a scene or imagery of people in a park. So these are just subtle ways in which you can change your messaging to increase your chances of really connecting with audiences within your trade area. So other social values might see are things like, maybe people have a real focus towards health. How do I, offer services and products that encourage a healthier lifestyle? People may index very low for xenophobia. So let's really highlight our ethnically diverse product mix and how we celebrate different cultures from across the globe. How do we really tap into that? Maybe people in my trade area are very enthusiastic about technology. How do I use this information to maybe bulk up my uh, online presence, or my app that I have, or maybe I want to join an app that's already out there to really help people connect through these more technology forward devices and solutions. So these are all different ways in which you could use this value data. The last section here is our segmentation information. So this is something that we produce here at Environics Analytics. We have a lot of different data points all at the residential postal code level. And sometimes it's hard for our clients to really make sense of all this, like starting to combine a lot of these variables that are important to their business can be difficult and tedious. So what we've done is we've organized or categorized all the residential postal codes across the country into one of 67 segments, we call them. And each of these segments have a catchy little name, and you'll see some of them shortly. But this is all based on the idea that people move into areas where there are other people like them around them, right? So birds of a feather flock together. But also, once people get to these areas, they start to align their behaviors with whoever is already living there. So it kind of works two ways. But it's very interesting data. We're not suggesting that everybody's the same in every postal code. This is really relying on what are those predominant behaviors and habits, and just increasing your chances of connecting with folks based on tendencies within these postal codes. So very, very interesting. You'll see the top 5 segments that are present in your trade area. So for example, in this one, we see social networkers compose of about 36% of the households within my trade area. You see a little bit of a write-up here about this really young segment. They're very connected socially. They're very culturally diverse. They're starting to make a little bit of money. They're mostly singles, but they get out and they engage in social activities that are available to them. So we'll give you the top 5 segments that are in your trade area and how they differ from the rest of the province. So you can really quickly get a sense as to who those people are in your trade area. And this is really one where you may say, oh yeah, there's a lot of these type of people in my area, but hopefully there'll be a couple where you say, oh, I didn't know they were that predominant in my area. How do I better align things to that crowd? So for example, I already talked about the social networkers category. You might see a group called On Their Own Again. These are older couples who are empty nesters, maybe retired, don't have a ton of money, but are still consume products and services. Maybe not as visible in your trade area. You don't see them quite as much, but how can you offer discounts or incentives to start drawing you into your store, to help them in this stage of their life. Same with Savvy Seniors is another older crowd, but they're a little more affluent. You may see them out like shopping a little bit more. How do you start tapping into, these folks and the disposable income that they have? So these are just different examples and how you can use some of the segmentation data, but it's a really good way to get a snapshot of the types of people who are in your trade area. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much. I see that there's a lot of questions coming in or comments, which is awesome. So I'm going to hand it back over to Ramona, who's going to talk about some of the ways in which you can use this data and really start connecting the dots here. So thanks, Ramona. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thanks, Greg. So a lot of the questions that came in up until this point have just been about the data set, Greg. And so people are asking, and I guess it's specific because this is the group that's associated with retail. So
Right.
you guys have a very big, broad depth and direction in terms of the type of retail that you all do. So
Right.
one of the questions was, is it possible for you to provide 15-minute drivability for some of the individuals who've asked for their data, because they say their people are driving into the location. And with that, someone is asking, there are a couple of people asking if we can have a comparative provincial one done.
So all the reports are compared to the province, right? So all the information that's going to be presented to you will be compared to the province, and that's going to be those indexes I talked about. So a red index means that people in your trade area are more likely to align to a variable, and a lower index will be less than the provincial averages. So that's already the case there, and we do have clients where you can change that benchmark. So a lot of thought often goes into how best to create that comparative benchmark. And then yes, you can change the trade areas as well. Because we had so many people as part of this program, we've really had to streamline things to do these in bulk. I think we're up over 800 of these reports. So we did have to standardize it in some ways, and we did have to make some trade-offs. So the trade areas you see for your reports are standard and are what they are. But of course, we do a lot of work with businesses where we'll customize some of the stuff, either the benchmark or the trade area. So happy to have those discussions as well. But as part of this program, all those two variables were constant.
Yeah, thanks,
Except,
Greg.
sorry, except for Ramona, where we were able to delineate urban versus rural in that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a really big thing, guys, because you have to remember this is called the My Main Street program. And we're very focused on main streets and what do we need to bring people back to the main streets, or bring them into the main streets where you guys are located. And so to Greg's point, we're limited by what we can provide you. So again, we're hoping that the data set that you're going to get in the market research report will be at least a starting point for you to look at as business owners, some of the things that you might have been thinking about or not. So I'm going to start with a couple of points about how do you apply this data, okay? So one of the things that we really need to look at as small business owners in a main street, your main goal right now, you're paying rent on a physical space. You need to make sure that you've got boots coming across, like, boots on the ground coming into your location right now. And so everything that we're trying to provide for you right now is what are different things that you can do to try to get more boots on the ground, more people coming back into your stores. Okay. And so some of the information that you've received here is really giving you some ideation about what it is that you could be focusing on, or where you might need to be focusing that you haven't been thinking about. So to the concept that you guys were talking about, we're talking about main streets. It's how do we build that sense of community, and how do we use this data to do and drive things to our customers. And one of the main points is, I always say, you want to be the best that you can be in your own backyard. How can you be the best retailer of your product or service in your community. And having said that, it doesn't mean that competitors or other people on your street that are doing the same thing are your enemy. But each of you brings to your business different skills, abilities, and I feel like sometimes I sound like Sesame Street that I say this, but there's no one else that is like you that brings your personal skills, abilities, and personality to what it is that you're doing in your community. And general human behavior will say that, and I'm a real Simon Sinek fan, so for any of you that know Simon Sinek, but it really is about that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so when we were talking about the psychographics, what are people's beliefs, attitudes, values? How are you sharing those values, your values with your community? Okay. And what ends up happening in a lot of cases when we looked at the social media or the way that people advertise is that a lot of the time your advertisement is all about you. I have a sale, I sell this. And what you're forgetting is, why do people need it? What problem are you solving for your community and your members? Okay. Because we become inundated with information. Okay. And so, how do you reach out? How do you see, touch, feel those people that you want coming into your store? So, a couple of different things that was really interesting when we talked about television usage. Okay. This is not to say that all of you need to start spending money on taking out television ads. Okay. You are all small businesses with very finite amount of resources available to you. If you had unlimited budgets, you'd have stuff all over the place. But you have very limited budgets, you have very limited number of people who are helping you. And so the goal is to figure out what is something that you can do with you and your staff in a manageable way and make it relatable. So let's go back to the TV example. I'm going to use a really quick example of that, but it's not about the TV ad or having your ad on TV, but looking at what are some of the things that people are watching. Okay. And if you look at the first one, curling, it's if curling is something that people in your community are watching, maybe it could be that you are helping host a curling bonspiel in your community, helping to sponsor the team. One of the cheapest, and so that you guys know, I am a business coach consultant. I've also owned a number of businesses, so I speak from experience, okay? One of the best bangs for the buck that I ever got for my business, okay, was actually sponsoring a little kids soccer team. And my business name was on the back of those shirts for a whole season. Those kids ran around the city all over the place with my name on their back. Okay. That cost me $250. If I would have equated that to taking out a TV ad or hiring someone to do my marketing, okay, I couldn't have gotten any more exposure in my community. Now, I got exposure. People saw my name all over the place. The other benefit of that was I got people coming up to me going, "Oh my God, Ramona, you were so wonderful to sponsor our team, and you don't even have kids on the team, and you helped my kids get new uniforms." Okay. That type of publicity you can't buy. Okay. Look at how you can be involved in your own community and what you can do to be a part of that. When we talk about advertising on social media, okay, it doesn't need to be that you are in every social media or that you have to hire a marketing professional. And this is the one that really gets me, where people are paying thousands and thousands of dollars to have someone create the perfect post. Okay. Actually, when you look at what people are actually consuming in certain media, they're actually consuming the live video, the organic stuff where you get your cell phone and you take a photo of yourself or do a video in your store talking about tips and trends or showing people something. Okay. People are more genuinely interested in that than they are interested in the perfect picture on their social media that you've spent thousands and thousands of dollars paying for to create the perfect picture. Okay, that little bit of you standing there going, "Hey, this is a change in season." The other interesting thing that you can do is provide education and information. Not telling me that you have a sale and right now swimsuits are on sale, okay? but it's like, it could be the, how do you pick out the perfect swimsuit? How do you measure the perfect shoe? How do you get the perfect bridal gown? What should you be looking for? When you become a subject matter expert in what it is that you sell, and you promote that as part of your social media or your marketing, and people can equate to you being the owner and the expert. Now you got people going, oh my God, they told me how to do this or what I should be looking for. I want to go meet and see this person. Okay. Um, and so it really is, how do you be part of your community? And I know there's additional marketing. You're talking about e-commerce, you're selling it to people in a number of different places. But what's keeping food on table, clothes on back, and your costs is that physical location that you have right now. If you didn't have that physical location and you were only online, the marketing message might be different. So now you've got to be able to combine both in a way that makes the most sense to you. And so you have to figure out. And so, my biggest thing, guys, people, if all you're competing on is price, okay, the minute someone else enters the market that has a lower price, you're going to lose all your customers because they are only interested in price. If what you're trying to build is repeat business that keeps coming back, or you're trying to build word of mouth and referral, you need to be in places, or you need to provide people the opportunity to give you that word of mouth. You need to be doing customer testimonials, doing the live video, having a customer do something that they've allowed you to post. So these are some of the ways that you can use this information that's really, really important to you. And what I see a lot of small business owners doing, and it happened in the My Main Street program, guys. I almost cried sometimes with what people were getting charged to design websites, or, have someone post for you. Like, it just made me cry because people were paying so much money to someone who did not know your business, who didn't feel your business, who wasn't excited about your business, giving you the same generic post that they would give to any other business that was in this same field. And so I really want you to think about, so if you are on Facebook or one of those mediums, right? Some of the best things are for you to become members of groups in your community. Okay. And you can go into any community, you can go into Facebook if that's your portal for doing things. Type in the words of what you want to know. Swimsuits, women's clothing. You will find a group from your community where people are getting together to ask each other questions. Be the subject matter expert in that group, providing people answers. So use this data, and I'm really big believer in, someone here mentioned it about the psychographics. What do people in your community believe in? What is it that drives them to make buying decisions? What are the problems that you are solving? When you focus on that and providing people with a solution, as opposed to saying, hey, I've got a sale on schnitzel today, okay, that becomes the way that you build these relationships. Creating your mailing lists, as Greg Kidd said, if you've got the opportunity to capture information, responding to what people are saying about your business in your voice. Okay, these are all very, very important and key things that you need to be looking at and using some of this data to help you build. So I am going to go back now. There, like, this just some of the ways that you can use this. I'm going to go back to some of the questions. I'm also going to open it up.
Yeah, I can touch on a couple I've seen here. So I totally agree with, I think it was Ian who talked about a balanced approach to creating these trade areas. Like when you look at some of those stores that are like a jewelry store he mentions, where it's more of a destination, and it's a higher ticket item, you're probably going to draw on a larger trade area. One of the things that we'll often do is look at, and a great way to start, if you want to start using data more or have plans to, if there's a way for you to capture postal codes of the people who are transacting with you, that's kind of gold for this sort of thing, because right there you're able to say, okay, how far are they coming from? And then you can start once you have that, you can create maybe a trade area that, let's say, captures 80% of the dollar spend, right? If you have that postal code and that transaction amount, a lot of the companies that we work with use that to be able to say 80% of my dollars are coming from within this trade area, which, as you say, Ian, would likely be a lot larger. And then that's, that's what you would use to really start honing in on, okay, what do these people look like, right? Because we have all that postal code information that's available at that level. So I think, there's a lot you can do here for sure. There were other things mentioned around the data. So all this data that you're seeing here is 2024 data. We'll release updated demographics this year in like April, and then throughout the year we release all these data for 2025, but everything in this report is updated to 2024.
Guys, I think the other thing that comes down from this, okay, the trade area, I think what you really need to focus on is the messaging, not necessarily, and Greg and I kind of have this discussion because it is a fine balance between, this postal code and that postal code, but a lot of it comes down to how do you interpret and provide message about your business, especially, let's look at the jewelry store. If your marketing and what you're doing and what you're talking about evokes emotion, it connects me to what it is that you are doing, helps me support you, because sometimes we as business owners are really bad about telling people what it is that we need from them. It's not just their dollars, but it's also, if they really like what they did, their ability to tell other people about what you do. So I'm going to give you the example of the jewelry store. So I think, I'm not sure who was it that gave me the jewelry store. Okay. For a jewelry store, when you look at the visuals, it's not the ring, it's not the necklace that's the visual. It's not the reason it's the reason that I buy that piece of jewelry. Okay. And so when you look at it, one of the ones that I did for a jewelry store was the fact that, we helped create a marketing ad that had, the grandma giving a piece of jewelry to the bride giving that piece of jewelry to her daughter. And we kind of did an ad of 3 generations of what a cherished piece of jewelry that can get handed down through the generations. It wasn't the specific item that we were selling, that it had to be this ring by Nathan Lane, with a 1.2 carat. It was the concept of how do you get that to go into your life? Like, how does that become a lifestyle choice of buying a really high-end piece of jewelry? It's the difference between fast fashion and sustainable fashion. Okay, if you want something quick and dirty and just a throwaway item that you're going away for a weekend or having a party and then it gets put in the back of your closet, or do you want a statement piece that's going to live with you forever? That's the message that you're selling. The item, the particular item, becomes a byproduct of that. And sometimes we get so caught up in trying to, sell our specials that we forget why people might need it. And that becomes really important. And that's why I'm saying it doesn't matter if it's trade area A or trade area B. If you kind of look at, what's the psychographics, what's the belief system, what are people interested in, and what can my business do to match that? Or what do we believe in? That becomes very important in what it is that you are also trying to promote. Yeah, value add versus price always wins. And I'm a super, super big believer in that. Okay, is that people will pay more for something that they value. But you as entrepreneurs have to sell that value. It's the value. What are you providing? One of the biggest things, and someone asked me why people moved away from the downtown, okay, moved away from the main streets and started buying COVID. Let's be honest, COVID was the pivot in terms of the way that we shopped, the way that we thought, the way that we bought. And so when COVID hit, everybody went to online retailers. Amazon became the big thing, right? Because it could come right to your door. You didn't even have to leave. What people are finding right now, and what retail councils, across North America are finding, is that most people are now missing that one-to-one interaction. They want to go into a store and have someone make recommendations or, to provide them with that level of service. If all you're doing is standing behind a counter waiting for someone to come in and bring something to the desk to pay for, that's not the interaction that they're looking for. So what personalized customer service do you provide that they can't get off an Amazon? And some of it could be the ease to make returns if you need to, the ease to find something specific. Your expertise and providing is really, really important. Now, one of the other things is, yes, you're talking about social issues of the downtown. That's way beyond the scope of what we can handle right now. But it is something that, we need to look at as a society. That's a societal thing. It's not necessarily an entrepreneurial thing right now that we can handle in the scope of this very, very small project. But in some cases, it's how can you be part of the solution? Are there committees? Are there groups that are looking at homelessness, encampments, mental health? Are there, neighborhood watches that you and your store, your organization could be part of? That shows that you're a partner in solution versus complainer of problem. Okay, so again, and again, it's a very blanket statement that I'm making here. Okay, and every situation is unique, but if you can be and your store can be seen as being part of a solution, then people are going to go, oh my God, they're committed to this. Yes, this is something I'm committed to. So it's very, very important. And I agree, like the concept of emotional marketing. And again, if you're part of a BIA, do you have some ideas or some solutions? Be the person that advocates for a solution, or some ideations that people may not be thinking about, becomes really, really important. So I'm hoping, I'm hoping that this session today, and I know that all of you have such divergent businesses. Um, oh, people aren't spending because of the uncertainty in the US. Okay, so you guys are worried about what's going on in the US. Why are we not worried about promoting Canadian? And so I'm going, if all we're doing is focused on problem, what's the solution? Forget about what's going on down there. We have Canadian things that we have that you can buy that are from other provinces. Maybe we as retailers need to look at where are we getting our goods and services from. Okay. And to strengthen the Canadian economy, people are really starting to look at this now and they're looking at it internationally as well. This is a different bandwagon, but again, look at what you can provide as opposed to where there is a problem. Okay.
Couple,
Um,
yeah, Ramona, just a couple of points too, from Ian's question and then another one. In terms of who we work with, this is a good opportunity for us to start working with small businesses, which we don't always do. We do work with BIAs a lot. So we do have visitor information that they love to say, okay, what's the volume of visitors over the past week compared to the previous week? Who are those people? And then we tie in all our data. So we do work with BIAs. We also work with municipalities around some of these social issues. So we're not gonna probably come up with a solution tomorrow, but we're doing the best we can to help them out as well. So I wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and like I say, guys, it's your engagement in the community. People look to small business owners in their community as being community leaders. And that doesn't mean that you have to have a position or be on a board of directors or something, but it's just your commitment to the community and making your community a better place. I think the one thing that we did see from COVID, and even when you look at people's movements, um, people started to move back to their hometowns and to their smaller communities. They wanted to, when you look at the top 10 reasons why people now move to a local community, okay, it's not about the dollar value, it's not about the job, it's about the vibe. It's about the feeling. It's about my recreation, my arts and entertainment, where I shop, what I buy. So, the other thing to build this community, guys, and I always said sometimes that downtowns are like riding on the GO train, that a business owner doesn't know who's sitting to the left of them and to the right of them. Okay, really, it is also about you trying to build partnerships with other business owners in the community and looking at ways that you can all save money, cross promotion, referrals. So you look at, if you're a retailer, is there a service business that might be able to, share your stuff? Okay, we need to build that sense of community for us as entrepreneurs as well. Okay, and as I started this thing talking about the fact that competitors are not our enemies, they can actually, you guys can start looking at what is your area of specialization versus my area of specialization. And then cross referring people. You may not meet my market, because not every store where they sell things to 19 and 20-year-olds is going to be where I'm going to be going in my 60s. Okay. But if I ended up there, maybe you can refer me to the store that I need to be looking at. Right. So this is all part of building community and building main streets, is really, really important. And so with that, I think we've gotten most of the questions out of the way. And if there is something that we haven't answered, I'm going to go back through the chat and just reach out to all of you. But we will have this recording posted, and that you can review it later on. It'll be on our website next week, and I will let everybody know when it is there, and you can go back and review it. And I really do appreciate the comments that all of you have provided with us today and the insight. And I want to thank EA as well for giving us at least a starting point for your discussions. Okay, so for those of you that may not have had any of this information before, I look at where we start and where we are right now, and not everything, like, being an entrepreneur is not necessarily a sprint, it is more of a marathon. So if you look at what information that you didn't have, and now you've gained a little bit more information, and now you know what information you really do need to focus on, this will be at least a starting point for many of you. So I appreciate it. I'm hoping that this was helpful to you. And we do look forward. So if you do have questions from this session, please reach out to your portfolio managers. They will refer them to me. If you have my email, you can reach out to me as well. I'm sure you've seen my email and everything that you've gotten. But we can help start to try to address some of these questions for you. So with that, I'm going to leave it. Have a great rest of the day. And I'm hoping that this was beneficial to all of you. And again, thank you, Greg, for participating in this.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye.